Let's speak with Alex Lacey. How are you doing, Alex?
Ian, I'm well. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Nice to have you with us. So you're a blue badge tour guide
Yes.
down in the capital. Just explain for those who don't know what that is.
So I'm a qualified London tourist guide, which means I've been through 2 years of really intense study and examinations. And it then means I'm allowed to guide in amazing places like the Tower of London, Westminster Abbey. And that's my full-time job as a self-employed tour guide.
How's business?
What business? There's been nothing this year, of course. My diary basically emptied at the very start of March before lockdown even happened. I had loads of bookings in for the year and it was looking to be a bumper year.
Yeah.
And within the space of about 48 hours, my diary emptied.
Wow.
I had 1 or 2 jobs between the 2 lockdowns, sort of back end of the summer. But other than that, there's been next to nothing. I've taken my business online. I've been doing virtual tours and sort of free live Instagram videos daily during lockdowns. But it's brought me in just an absolute fraction of what I normally earn.
Can you hear us okay, Alex? I think your line might have. Yep, you can hear us okay.
Yep.
So I suppose all you had to do then is just contact the government and say, can you help me out?
Well, you would think so, wouldn't you? I became self-employed in 2015. So I've been 5 years in my career and I hit the ground running. I'm single. I've only got myself to support myself. So I thought, well, I'm going to work really, really hard and I'm going to make a name for myself. I'm going to get a reputation and I had no savings at all when I started. So I'm going to put, a bit of steam behind me and work as hard as I can for 5 to 10 years. And then once I've got a head of steam, I can slacken off a bit. And what that meant is that I was really successful and I earned average £52,000.
Wow.
Which was great, but it meant, I sacrificed an awful lot to do that. It was my entire life. And now my income has gone to, I would say, about 8% of what I normally earn. And times are tough, really. And the government has decided that anybody self-employed earning over £50,000, they don't get anything. They don't get a penny.
Yes, which is curious because, you're not still earning that money. That's the point, isn't it?
It is, and there's been a lot of the trouble with the self-employed scheme is that if you were in employed work in PAYE, you could be on a salary of £1 million, £2 million, and you would still be getting your furlough payments. But for self-employed, they've decided that over 50k is that everybody is absolutely fine. And Rishi Sunak keeps saying, if anybody earns over 50k, then the average is £200,000. Well, if you've got 1 or 2 outliers in there earning several million or billion a year, of course that's going to bring the figure up, depending on how you do it. And he's obviously decided that he wants to do it based on the mean figure, which is going to split up massively. So I have colleagues of mine who were just underneath the £50,000 mark. They've been given the grants. I worked extra hard. If I'd taken 2 extra weeks off, I'd be given thousands from the government now. But my income has gone to practically zero, and it's unsustainable.
Just because you went over that kind of man-made line, as it were.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been really creative to try and bring in income, and I've worked really, really hard this year. I also took a job in a chocolate shop just before Christmas. I did about 7 days there, and then the tier 4 restrictions came in and that job evaporated as well. So it's been really, really tough. And I'm only just keeping my head above water, really.
I mean, in terms of, there's no way I suppose you can be a tour guide, even with social distancing considerations, namely because there are no tourists.
Exactly. And I really had to, and the majority of my business was coming in from America and from, around the world, really. A lot of it was America, but I also had clients from France and the Netherlands. I speak 4 languages, so, I can guide in a variety of languages. And of course, that all dried up. So I had to pivot my market to the UK market. But, I'm starting from zero. And even then, when I did have a few tours in between the lockdowns, I managed to book them up. But, there's no tourism is not allowed now. We can't do walking tours. It's you're not allowed to leave your area. There's nothing there for tourism.
Yeah. Alex, I wish you loads of luck, and there will be a point, of course, this will all change, but for many people there is a sense that a lot of that damage that has been done will be almost irredeemable for many. But thank you, Alex Lacey, who's a blue badge tour guide down there in the capital, taking people on the various tourist elements of London. I'd imagine that's quite an interesting job, and as she said, it can be quite lucrative in the good times. You say 52,000. But in working really hard and doing 7 days a week and 12-hour days, it's put her over the line, which means that she's now not entitled to any kind of grants or furlough situation where she would have been had she been earning $49,000 a year, as it were. Let's speak to Anna Collins. Anna's a freelance TV producer and one of the Excluded. Anna, afternoon to you. It's a kind of a title you didn't really think you'd have, part of the 3 million.
No, not at all.
Tell us your story. What happened? Because you were, you've been successful. You've a great body of work behind you, ready to go for another year ahead, and then it all kind of stopped, right?
Yeah. So I had a year of work booked up. I work on a lot of primetime BBC, Channel 4, ITV, big series. They all disappeared overnight. The TV industry is suffering, and I'm excluded because I was contracting on PAYE up until April 2019. So I only have a 1920 tax return, even though my job as such hasn't changed. I've done the same job for years. I've just changed from PAYE contracting, very common in television, to invoicing. I've paid tax for 20 years, and now I get nothing. So.
Wow. So just by dint of changing from one system to another, which is often encouraged, and that's a good thing, and it puts you perhaps a little more in charge of things, all the various reasons why somebody might move into that world. By dint of that very small move, it turned out to be more significant than you'd bargained for.
It did, and the thing is, I made a clean break from 1819 to 1920. I waited till the end of the tax year before I changed, so there was no crossover. Rishi's argument is that people that contract a PAYE are excluded because they've done a mix of invoicing and PAYE, and the paper trail is too difficult to follow. But that's not the case. I have an accountant, I have P60s, I have tax returns. There's nothing complicated about my situation. Yeah,
but it doesn't sit within the template or the parameters of what's been prescribed by the government.
It doesn't, and I know you've covered other reasons why people are excluded, like the cap of £50,000.
Yeah.
If you're employed, you could earn £5 million a year. You'll only be entitled to the £2,500 a month that they've topped the furlough payments at. But there's no cap on what you earn. But self-employment is capped at 50, which sounds like a lot of money to a lot of people. But if you have a family and you live in London and you've got a mortgage and maybe your wife work, that is still living month to month.
Of course it is. And also you often work in your world, as I know, working in a related world, you may well have, you might have 2 years worth of great work. You could then have 6 months of no work while you're lining the next thing up. That's kind of the way it's the payoff, if you like, is, you can earn well, but, you run certain, it's a precarious industry.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I decided, I finished my last job. I have had one job this year. I did a Channel 4 series for 6 weeks. Because I did that job, the universal credit that I am entitled to is now £3 a week.
£3 a week?
Yeah, £3 a week, because I've had one 6-week job in an entire year.
Wow.
So, but as far as the government's concerned, when I kind of have to tick boxes, that's saying that I am receiving help, but I'm not receiving any meaningful help. And every time Rishi and Boris are cornered about this in Parliament, they just give the same answer, that the self-employment scheme that they have going is amongst the best in the world, and very generous. And it is generous to the people that qualify for it.
Yep.
But people like me, through no fault of my own, don't, and I can't survive on £3 a week.
No, I don't think many people can. But of course, it allows them to say you're receiving help, which you just mentioned there, which is a neat kind of governmental get out of events, really. Just tell us about the TV industry, because obviously some things, I've got friends who do exactly what you do for a living in related areas, and they've all said, things have changed. Programs that would have been made have either been cancelled or curtailed, or crews are smaller, or things are different. So, I mean, it's simply been downsized in a huge way.
Yeah, it has been downsized. And a lot of programs I make things like SAS Who Dares Wins, Hunted, I do natural history, I do Bear Grylls shows, all kinds of shows like that are also filming abroad. So it's not just our quarantine issues that we have to contend with. It's going to other countries and them allowing us in. So yeah, crews have been scaled down, productions have been put on pause. You know, I've had lots of promises of work this year, and I had a 14-week job lined up, which was a lifesaver. And then the day before my flight, they cancelled it.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I'm just in this position where I've 100% run out of money. I ran out of money about 6 weeks ago. I also lost a house purchase at the beginning of this. I lost £6,000 with solicitors for that. I then had to purchase a much smaller place, and I missed out on the stamp duty by just over 24 hours. They've absolutely hammered me this year, and I've paid tax my entire life. My paper trail is so simple, but you know, the response I've had is the government will look at historical self-assessment, but they won't look at historical P60.
Yeah.
But the figures are there. They have the figures. They know exactly how much tax I've paid.
These are,
and £3 a week.
And
I'd love to see Rishi
I can't. I don't want to laugh because it's not funny, but simultaneously, I mean, you can't even get a gin and tonic, for goodness sake, Anna, for £3.
No, and the thing is, I can't. They keep insisting. The government keep insisting that everyone, if we don't qualify for the self-employment scheme, that we are entitled to some help. But again, £3 a week is nothing. I can't get a bounce back loan because I don't qualify for self-employment. I can't even get a bank loan because who's going to loan me money? I haven't earned money.
When there's no earnings coming in. Listen, Anna, I wish you loads of luck. Thank you for sharing that with us. And it just highlights how this is right across the board, whether you're cutting hair or producing primetime TV programs, as Anna does. This just affects so many people. It's just a wide gamut of people that are affected by this. Thank you to Anna Collins. The excluded 3 million here. Let's just get our hands around this. Now, there is a package from Rishi Sunak, 4.6 billion to help businesses survive the third lockdown. But that's no good to so many people. Let's speak to Rachel Flower, spokesperson for Excluded UK, the collective platform for those excluded from the UK government COVID-19 support programmes. Rachel, good to have you with us. And I understand you kind of founded Excluded UK because you found yourself in this very position.
The Excluded UK was set up as a grassroots not-for-profit alliance back in May when it became apparent that these gaps in the support schemes existed. And initially, we were just drawing attention to them and asking the government to fix them. We were quite patient, but obviously, as the time has rolled on, and we're sat here really nearly a year on since the schemes were put in place, with people in an extremely dire financial position and also the mental health implications of that.
Yeah. And again, I mentioned just before you came on, as you would have heard, it's the across-the-board nature of this problem. It's a lot of people, but it's also a lot of industries.
Yeah, I mean, we're also at pains to say this is UK taxpayers. There's no evidence at all that they've done anything wrong to be excluded from the schemes. It's the hard edges and the policies attached to the schemes that have caused their exclusion. And it's the lack of political will on the part of the government to actually assess and then report in a transparent way to fix those schemes. So it's taxpayers, but also their households. Yeah. So we're talking about, the size of the problem is a population of the UK equivalent to Wales. It's 10% of the workforce. So trying to put this into perspective for people, the sheer scale of what we say is a social injustice and the lack of the government's will to fix it.
And in terms of the numbers, you've brilliantly broken them down there just to give us an idea of how big this is. Is anybody listening to this in government? Because they must, as I've said to previous guests today, that if we're talking about this on national radio, Rachel, they must be aware of it.
Yeah, we're a completely apolitical organisation. We're a pressure group. And so from our perspective, we are looking for due process and transparency about this. So we established with the inquiry point for the all-party parliamentary group that now has 260 MPs, cross-party calling for this. Of course, we've got Tracy Brabin bringing a request in Parliament just today, but there's been an incredible amount of pressure and attention over the months. For me, as a really a lay person, it actually actually has been absolutely shocking to see how difficult it is to really truly hold the government to account for these decisions that are made. And in the wake of the pandemic, the more worrying thing now is, what is the economic impact for us as a nation when we're basically dividing off a sector of society and not supporting them with parity against those that have been adequately supported and enable really lots of people to come through the pandemic relatively unscathed because they've had some income support. These individuals have been pushed into debt, hardship. They're going to become potentially a burden upon the welfare state. They're going to be creating unemployment figures for the economy. So setting aside the moral, ethical question of why are these people not being fairly supported, that's just a pure parity question. We've been calling upon the government to answer the economic reasoning. What justification is there for not supporting them?
It doesn't make a lot of sense, and particularly when many of the people are, looking at the different industries, it's right across the board. A lot of these are small and medium-sized businesses. So the very areas you think might need some protection, because they are likely to be the areas that in any other context would be getting us out of financial difficulties, because these are hardworking men and women who, are diligently putting together business plans, trying to expand their enterprises, no matter how big. These form the backbone of our economy. We often talk about the fact it's not always the Googles and the Starbucks that make this thing called the UK tick. It's people who work in these industries, people who have those small businesses, who've diligently set them up and work really hard.
Yeah, I want to be really clear on that, though, that there are an element of that small business market that you talk to, and limited company directors, and they then themselves employ people. But actually, when surveyed, a large proportion of the individuals we're talking about are also low-income individuals. Sure. They are literally self-employed, sole traders, earning a very modest income. Yep. And in a survey that we did, there was a vast proportion of our community who were only on maybe £20,000 to £25,000 or below when the pandemic started. So that's why we've seen such an extreme level of hardship. We have people in the community who can't feed their children, they've lost their homes, and they've been pushed into, as I say, a mental health crisis because they didn't have much to begin with. So we need to be careful when we're talking about the diversity to say it's not really businesses per se. There's an impact on some of the businesses that were, good, viable businesses, but actually it's the individuals and the taxpayers that are really hardest hit, arguably, by this. The job retention scheme and the SICE, the self-employed support schemes, they're essentially income support. Yeah. So they are, trying to get parity to people. If you can't go out and earn a livelihood and you're staying home, saving lives, protecting the NHS, sure, then the taxpayers' money that the Chancellor is responsible for should be helping them just to cover basic living expenses. Yeah. So we're going to carry on calling for that backdated parity, because coming back to the economic point, all those people would do is pay off their debts, get back on top of their mortgage, their rent, and their utilities bills, and so on and so forth, so that they're not disadvantaged by the pandemic. That's only fair, just and right. Indeed.
Listen, thorough stuff, Rachel. Thank you. Rachel Flower, spokesperson for Excluded UK. Do check out their website. You might discover certainly some understanding of your own position when you look at what the guys over there are representing and the arguments they're trying to advance. There is a debate in Parliament. Tracy Brabin, the MP, will be leading that debate.